On this episode, we talked about
film portrayals of death.
good portrayals, maybe not so good portrayals.
And of course, Nick went on one of his 30-minute tangents nobody really knows or cared.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, a psychotherapist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
The film's portrayal of death. How do you want to approach this, Nick?
Why don't you start out talking about film?
Okay, films. So there's a lot of films out there, a lot of deaths. You see a lot of funerals, actually. It tends to be you only get like one part of death, right? You only get like one. It's either like death and then it's like at the cemetery, right? That's how films always do it. It's always like the Catholic priest. You got the green lawn. He's always doing like the end closing prayer or the eulogies going on. There's the big picture that somebody spent a lot of money on at Costco or whatever to get it like blown way the hell up. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. Sorry. And the pastor's in like his formals with the awesome shawls and all that. And then you have the family is all in black, like black that I can see. The guys are all wearing with the black suits with white ties and black suits, white shirts, black ties. It's like
It's a very
it's a black tie
traditional
affair.
Yeah.
You got like 6 hearses. I don't know why. And then the cars. The cars are all black too for some reason. They're always like lined up
unless it's 6 feet under.
perfectly. And you got some guy who's always spying on funerals.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm talking spy movies now.
Okay, I don't know where we're going.
Snipers in the
So
trees.
let's bring up a couple, right? So let's talk about I'm going to go with my favorite ones about death.
Okay.
6 Feet Under was probably one of my favorite series done. Is it exaggerated? Absolutely. However, I don't live in California, so I don't really know how the funeral business goes in California. But if we bring it back to the Midwest, or at least Michigan, where we have experience, there is a lot of exaggeration going on in that show. However, the deeper themes in that show, I think, are really good. And it's one of the very few series that actually has the best ending of all time. I really highly advise you to watch it. However, I think it's important that we note that when I say exaggerated, there's like a scene in the show where the daughter takes a amputated foot to school. Like that doesn't happen.
I like that series too because not only does it talk about death, which is obviously what we're talking about, but it actually goes into the family as a funeral home. So you actually get to see behind the closed doors as how some of these funeral directors dealing with their families, but also dealing with their internal grief, which I don't want to say anything. I don't want to spoiler alerts here, but yeah, you deal with both sides of it. So that was you were absolutely right. That's a great one. One I want to talk about, and I can't think of what the title is, but it's Kevin Bacon is a soldier, and he brings home a soldier that dies.
Oh yeah, the military one.
And they did it. They did it with a lot of knowledge. They did a lot of like studying how it's done, how it's properly done, and it's really good. It's really, really good. And I've had a lot of military say like that's the best movie to watch to actually experience that because we've had
Taking Chance, I believe, is what the movie's called.
Taking Chance, and it's really good, and it shows you what actually happens. People don't realize if soldier dies in duty, they're watched 24/7 until the actual disposition occurs. So there has been soldiers that have spent the night in funeral homes, including our own, to make sure that fallen soldier gets the best. And then Dover, which is an incredible place, the way that they do the embalming and they suit up the soldier, and then like the pants have to be 100% pressed.
Well, it's pure respect.
Oh,
right?
It is incredible. So I like that movie just because you actually get to experience what actually occurs from death on the battlefield or the front to the funeral, and is really well done.
Another interesting TV series, because I guess Ben's going with movies, I'm going with TV series, is Dead Like Me. I really don't have much to say about it besides the fact it brings death into the foreground.
Isn't that about reapers? They die and then they become reapers.
Yes.
Yeah, which is always an interesting.
But
thought,
it's a fascinating perspective on death. It's someone who is living, is not living anymore, but now has their other roles in their afterlife.
A newer one that people can watch, The Good Place. The Good Place.
That's the humorous one, right?
The Good Place. And they consider heaven the good place and hell the bad place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's comical. But that has some good thoughts about death too. What Dreams May Come, one of the greatest films on death. And it's Robin Williams, and Robin Williams is just incredible. And to think about that movie and to think about his own demise is kind of ironic that it happened the way that it happened. God rest his soul. Robin, we miss you. And anybody who's dealing with mental health, like please go out, please go and find help, and make sure to check in on your loved ones. But that aside, that movie is incredible about death because it's dealing with, and I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, but it's dealing with a man that has dealt with two sets of deaths that really cripple his opinion on life, his opinion on his faith, his opinion on everything. And then he has this incredible experience happen to him, and it brings grief. There's anger. There's all the 5 stages that he goes through. And going to that, I'm going to bring up another movie because I think the best acting in a movie of the 5 stages of grief within like 10 minutes is Steel Magnolia. Sally Fields, she actually goes through all 5 stages of grief within like 10 minutes. And it is incredible. If you haven't seen that monologue that she does, it is incredible. And how these women deal with death is really good to watch.
Another TV series that I think is really, really good is This Is Us. And if you've ever watched it, we're going to have to give a spoiler right here. But a lot of the show is about their dad passing away and how they have all differently dealt with it. Because all of them really respected their dad and loved their dad. He made his mistakes. He struggled with, I think, alcoholism is part of the show. But anyways, I digress.
2 spoilers now.
I digress.
It shows the family dynamics too.
But what I'm saying is he adopts 3 children in the show, which that's episode 1. That's not a spoiler. But each of the children deal with the grief in a completely different way, and they all 3 hold the dad in a different light. And I think that is such a beautiful point for grief, because you can have the same family members. You can have Ben and I, identical twins, who lose our father and deal with it completely different. Technically, we have the same DNA in our body. We were born the same time. We were 4 minutes apart, but I digress. The important part is that it doesn't matter, where you're born, where you're raised. It matters of how you individually internalize death. And if you haven't watched This Is Us, this is a show that actually does show how disenfranchised grief can destroy people.
I'm going to talk about some negative things about movies now. We talked a lot of positive about death, but let's talk about negative things about death. I'm going to talk on my colleagues what I see in movies all the time. Let's start with the arrangement room that we see in so many films, and it's always the funeral director comes in and he goes, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Would you like Mom to be in the golden package?" It's like the most awkward. The funeral directors are always the most awkward. They're stoic. They don't have any emotion. Stoic.
I'm surprised that you would say stoic. I wouldn't say stoic.
Stoic
they're
is
creepy.
They're
creepy. They're thin. They're tall.
They're in the back of the room. They kind of like sloth. They're almost like a horror movie. Like they kind of like sloth in a little bit
and emotionless.
Oh, they have no emotion whatsoever. And I don't like that. And you see it countless. I know all of you listeners right now are like shaking your heads like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've just seen that movie the other day.
We got Nosferatu back in the embalming room right now.
Good funeral director to show is My Girl. My Girl. Dan
Yeah.
Aykroyd plays an amazing funeral director, and it's very...
Especially a funeral director that lives at the
It
funeral
hits home because it's a family-owned funeral home. The grandma is
movie.
like rocking in the other like arrangement room, and
And kids, do not take a bat and hit a beehive. Bad idea. Never do it.
And true story, to get a little bit humanistic about Benny on the show, my wife loved the name, always wanted her first daughter to be named Veda even before she met me because she loved My Girl so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so our daughter's name is Veda, and she married a funeral director who basically lives in a funeral home.
Well, your wife married a funeral
Yeah,
director.
she didn't
who lives at a
know.
funeral.
She had no idea that
And
she...
you had a daughter that you named Veda, which in the show, the funeral
the
director's
funeral,
daughter
Dan
is Veda.
Aykroyd, his daughter's name Veda.
What happened to the mom in that show? I don't remember. The
She
original
died.
mom.
She died.
She died?
She died in the film. In the film.
In the film.
So that was a really good portrayal of a funeral director. I'm trying to think of some other ones. There are some good ones. 6 Feet Under, the dad is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And you only see him in a couple.
But I
episodes.
love again.
David does a great
This is
job in
something that research has found. Funeral directors, they don't get a lot of press. Let's be honest. And if they do get press,
It's bad.
it's bad press. But one of the things that they have researched and found out about funeral directors is, unlike very similar to a doctor or a lawyer or any high stress job, alcoholism is a big thing, right?
Yep.
Because they're not able to vent with people because, HIPAA, all that stuff. And on top of it, people don't talk about death.
No.
Even, unfortunately, spouses or close family members,
They can't decompress.
So
And they don't
how
have
do they
time.
decompress?
They don't have time for hobbies, and they barely
Well,
get sleep.
It's not even that. It's the idea that they can't disconnect when they're off.
Right, because you're a funeral director.
Well, you're on call 24/7. That's what I'm saying. You're on call 24/7. There's no time to actually completely decompress. You're right.
No.
That's a good word. You don't. And if you have time to do that, it's riddled with, did I do something wrong? Do I need to call this family? Do I need to take care of this newspaper? There's a lot of little things that come up that you have to deal with on your off time.
And I'll be honest, if you're a good funeral director, you care about your family, so you're actually grieving with them. You may not be grieving as hard, but after a while, that builds up, and you're dealing with crazy cases, babies, kids.
So I agree with you.
Accidents.
It's like a therapist, right? There is this very gray area where you have to be compassionate and empathetic enough to connect with the person, but you have to be able to somehow disconnect, right? Because if you can't, you have to take all that home with you. All that anger, all that stress, all that...
Isn't it funny, though, that you don't hear as much negative about shrinks are... Sorry for saying that, but psychologists aren't.
You literally just
Shrinks.
made your
I like-
point. You literally just bit your tongue.
No,
when you said
my
that.
my comment was you don't hear a lot of people complain about money when it comes to getting psychology.
Oh, man,
Psychologists.
I hear that all the time.
Not as much as I hear about funeral directors.
Man, I wish you'd be a therapist for a second. A lot of people ask me, why do I deserve to be paid what I'm paid?
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then you don't say, they don't take the doctorate in consideration.
Even with a doctorate, they don't understand that. Because, again, mental health is considered different from physical health.
That's so interesting.
One thing I do want to say out to the public,
Wow.
because this is a misconception. I don't do anything except help guide you to do what you need to do. I don't have a magic wand. I can't literally touch you and go, you're healed. A lot of people believe that. That's not the case. I have been trained very extensively, long time, long education, all that stuff, to be able to walk through something with you. Whether that was trauma, whether that was death, whether that was isolation, all that stuff is what I've been trained to help you, guide you through. Not necessarily I can change anything. That's not my job. My job is to help you figure out what you need to do.
Right.
Gives the power back to you.
Can we get back to movies now, Nick?
We can.
After you gave
Yeah,
us
we
your
can. Absolutely.
monologue and
You asked me about
soliloquy on. Honestly, something I thought about was maybe they should have like a death consultant or a funeral director, just a funeral professional on set to help. Because I find that the better movies, the better TV shows have a lot more education into that. So if you're going to throw a funeral director in, right, don't just be like, okay, you're tall, you're awkward, you got it. You got the role, buddy.
I'm going to blow people's mind. I think one of the best movies that talks about disenfranchised grief is The Lion King. Everybody's seen it, right? Mufasa dies, right? And Simba.
Spoiler alert. Gosh, you're giving them all out today.
Simba is told by his uncle that it was his fault, right?
Right.
And he runs away, and he has these crew, whatever. Everybody's seen
Hakuna
Lion
Matata,
King.
you know what I mean?
If you haven't seen Lion King, please go see Lion King. But that is a great representation of disenfranchised grief.
Right.
This idea that I screwed up. It was me because they died. You know, I think I hear a lot of kids that I didn't spend enough time with Dad before he died, or I didn't do this.
Right.
You know, and then they feel this internal guilt, right? That's a perfect example of how guilt can ruin someone.
Right, but I was talking about should yeah, you kind of went off yet again another tangent. Should films and TV shows, should they have like a professional on staff, or at least consult with a funeral director or consult with a psychologist about how do we make the scene more relevant, right? Because let's be honest, if people don't go to funerals, that's all they know about.
So I think the biggest thing is you're asking a should I versus do I?
No, should films,
we as a society deal better with death? Absolutely. Talk about it.
No, I'm talking about in the films. In the films.
That's what I'm
if
saying.
You portray,
should we as movie producers, if we were movie producers,
yes, directors, scripters,
do this? Absolutely. Do we? No, because what we want is we want people to go home with the feeling, the internal dread, the internal guilt, all that stuff. That's part of the beauty, right? We're trying to get you to feel. So when you see, perfect example, The Lion King, when you see Simba deal with his Mufasa, his dad, dying, we all are like, oh, what? We don't want to be healed at the show. That's not the idea of it.
No,
the
idea
I'm
is talking
that you
about
go
more
home going, oh, I hated that scene.
No, I'm talking about more like when you have a funeral director enter set, and it's a 5-minute clip. Should the directors and the scripters like actually have some knowledge about them before they throw a funeral director in? That would help us out
so here's
to represent
what
funeral directors, because it doesn't matter
so
in the
let's
plot.
Go with
the funeral
let's go with the
director's
percentages of funeral directors and psychologists in the world versus normal people. Okay, most people don't know or not educated in the way we are, right?
But isn't that what
we're going to flip everything on its shoulder when we talk to them, because they never have dealt with this.
But isn't that what we're trying to do? It's
this
like the
is
better
what this
education.
Show is,
so yeah,
right.
So we need better professional funeral directors and
I
psychologists.
do believe that movies try to bring death to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have a good follow through. However, realize they only have 2.5 hours to make a good movie.
That's true.
If it's that long,
right?
Ben, do you think that films in general put a stigma on death and towards funeral directing?
I wouldn't say a specific feeling towards funeral directors. I think, I'll be honest, and this is my assumption, which we all know what assumptions make, but I think they don't either. Usually when you go to there's a funeral home or funeral director, it's a very short scene. So probably for them, it's like, okay, now I gotta find one guy who's going to be in there for 2 minutes, and he's going to say a couple things, and then he's gone. Like usually he's not a protagonist or antagonist, or he's like funeral. He's probably in the actual ending, like funeral director 1, Clifton.
He's not actually have a name in the film.
Yeah, he might not even is. So
yeah.
I do think there is a stigma, because I don't think they don't spend a lot of time on funeral directors. They really don't. What I would like to see out of film is a portrayal of a funeral director.
My thing is that's the problem, right? We see these negative portrayals on the media, movies, TV shows, and news about your industry, profession. Sorry, I'm going to try to change that to profession.
It's okay.
And I think that really highlights in a negative perspective your career.
Right.
Because people see this and go, oh, that's got to be a funeral director. Every funeral director. Oh, yeah, here we go again.
There he is.
You know,
Ben Lurchman.
Lurchy McGurk. He's driving behind the ambulance, waiting for that
There he
person.
is.
You know what I
There he
mean?
is. He's waiting
scalping.
at the hospice,
He's
the nursing
scalping, right?
homes, giving out his cards.
But we're using humor, but there is truth behind this, right? You watch all this stuff, and it would be very easy to fall into that trap of every funeral director is a money-grubbing vampire, basically.
Well, yeah,
you live in the dark. You're very pale. You don't ever get to see the sunlight.
That's it.
You know what I mean? If you think of all these old scary movies, like they've put you out to be predators.
Oh, yeah.
That prey off the dead. But what I'm saying to you is this is the problem. It's very easy to watch any news about anything and think, oh, this is reality. And what I would challenge all the viewers and everybody thinking and listening to this is to take a step back and do your research, because there is a lot of good funeral directors out there that actually do care.
Oh, absolutely.
And do their utmost best to make sure that their families are taken care of.
Bravo. You get the finger snaps, so it's like it's not loud on the podcast. And the golf clap. Oh, hole in one. He sunk it.
But no, I really mean that, you know.
Well, yeah, because it's like the psychologist. They always show the psychologist has more mental issues than the actual patients that they're dealing with.
There's a
right?
truth behind that.
Well, I mean,
there is a truth behind
look
that.
at you,
I mean,
man.
let's be honest. I had a therapist tell me a long time ago, the first 10 years of doing therapy, you're fixing you. The next 20 to 30 years, you're taking care of everybody else.
I think everybody just needs to take in consideration movies are movies.
Right.
You know, they're made up.
You know what? My biggest thing
real.
I always say is just go talk to a local funeral director. If you really don't know, if you've never had an experience with a real funeral director, just go talk to the local. Let's be honest. Every funeral director is there 9 to 5 every day. They're a 24/7 business. You can call them most any night and they will show up.
I like how you said they're 9 to 5, but they're there 24.
Well, I mean, they're going to be in the premises from 9 to 5.
You can get a hold of us 24
That's
hours.
what I'm saying is they're in the. You could just show up between 9 and 5 and they'll be there. If you call after 5 o'clock, which you should, because these people do have lives, it's important for you guys to stress that too.
Right.
Yes, you are 24/7, but you also do have your own families.
Funeral directors have wives and
I
kids.
know, it's
and
surprising, right?
grandkids and grandparents and
To think that you actually are human, right?
So
And not a vulture.
Lurch, Ben
vulture,
Lurchman,
You know, but
measuring you
But
up.
what I'm saying to you is that I think hopefully this show humanizes the funeral industry.
I love that. If you ever wondered what funeral directors are like, yeah, absolutely, go seek one out. You'd
now
be
they might be
shocked
in
how they
jeans,
are.
they might be mowing the lawn if you just randomly show up, but they'll be there. They'll answer any. I have not met a funeral director, even in my, I asked to do all these interviews for my study. There's not been one that was like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, sorry.
You know, they want to educate.
Sorry, bro.
You guys want to educate. You want to make people understand what you do.
Yeah, and I became a funeral director because I wanted to help families. That's what I watched my dad do. I'm assuming that's what he watched his dad do, and what his dad watched his dad do.
Right.
And
Right.
that's why
Generational,
I
right?
did it.
But not even the generational funeral. Even the new funeral directors are really
they're
making
getting
an
into-
effort to try to educate.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, that most of the ones that haven't are not part of families or haven't worked at a funeral home is because they had a really good experience or they had a really bad experience.
And if you're listening right now and you have any questions, feel free to leave us a message. We have no problem with answering any question you could possibly have.
And what's your favorite movies or TV shows about death? And do you think that portrays death in real?
Do we sound like we should be that funeral director on that show?
Come on in. Well, it's, I could be creepier if I want to.
for you.
Just waiting always in the shadow corner, like
That's why I
finding
said
the
vultures,
shadow.
right? You're on top of a bill. It's like Batman, but in a
like
bad
they
way.
all have scoliosis at the age
Right.
of like 10. Like they're
Right,
all
your
like,
bat signal is literally the ambulance like sirens. That's your
it
bat
is.
signal, right?
you get the
You know
red
what I
phone,
mean?
but it's a black phone.
We're joking, but in reality, I think a lot of people are misunderstand your profession, and this show is hoping to help skew that.
Well,
in a
Nick,
good manner.
I think it's about that time. Time for Q&As.
Bring it home.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
Everybody sure does love those Q&As. All right, Nicholas Pickles, Lemon Stickless. All right, here's the first question. Favorite funeral scene. What is your favorite funeral scene in a movie? So the funeral itself. I can't think of my favorite because there's just so many movies out there, but I can tell you a scene that really strikes me, and I just watched it last year. It's the Netflix series, the Haunted Hill House on Haunted Hill, or something with Hill House, something Hill House. They have a scene where they're all at their sister and daughter's wake. It's not a funeral, but it's a wake. So I'm already. But they have a huge fight after everybody's gone, and it was very impressive to me because, and like I said, I have experienced a lot of families. Every once in a while, you get to see a family deal with grief in an anger way. It's not necessarily a bad thing because I think a lot of families, that's how they get things done. They fight it out, and then they come back together. And this family really goes at it. And the way that it was scripted, it felt very real because I've experienced something very similar to that. And I thought, wow, whoever did that has a really good experience with not only family dynamics, but has been in a situation that has dealt with death in that situation. I thought, very well done. Brava. So that would be the one that I'll bring up.
You know, actually, as I'm thinking about it, Braveheart was a good one, where Mel Gibson, William Wallace as a kid, is at his father and his brother's funeral. And actually, technically, they kind of show him laid out before the funeral actually happens. And he walks in and he has to see his dad and his brother died in war. And I think there's a beautiful thing to children in death, in that it's very real for them. I don't know how to explain that better than that. They don't separate like adults do. Adults are able to disengage in certain traumatic experiences. Kids can't. They're not able to separate like adults can. So they are real. They're always there. So like the smell or the feel or what's going on, just to watch a kid have to see their dad and their brother pass away violently and then have to go to the funeral after it. I don't know. It's just, I think that was my favorite one because I think it brought reality to death.
It pierces the veil of innocence.
Yeah. And he held on to it the rest of his life. And even in that movie he talks, he always kind of references back to this idea that he's trying to prove something to his dad. Again, we're talking about disenfranchised grief this episode somehow. Yeah. But I think it's an important thing to talk about because death is not something that you could just shake off. It's not something that it's just going to go away. It's always going to be a part of you. It's going to be there with you through the good and the bad. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a wound, and it's how you treat it, how each and every one of us treats it. And some people treat it differently.
So let's move on to the next one, Benny.
You got
Hollywood advice. What do you think Hollywood could do better depicting death or funerals in films to make them more realistic?
I think we already kind of touched on this, but I think the answer to this is just study more of the actual process of what a funeral director does, how wakes are performed, or funerals, or visitations, or memorial services, or et cetera, et cetera. Do your research on it before just experiencing one funeral and like, oh, that's how all funerals are.
I think the biggest thing that Hollywood could do is share the focus. They do a really good job most of the time depicting what it's like to lose someone that you love. What they don't do a good job of depicting is what it's like to be that person that's helping that person through it.
Ooh.
Like the funeral director or the psychologist or that friend that's like, listen, like, this is going to suck. Like, it's going to hurt. Like, what can I do to help?
And maybe
I'm there for a reason. I am there 24/7. I am in a suit as much as I possibly can be. If you call me, I'm going to answer. They don't humanize the professionals. That's what I think they could do a better job of. They don't have to go into depth of what a funeral director is in that movie. Don't get me wrong. That would be its movie in itself. But what they could do is humanize the funeral director, not make him look dark and scary and gloomy. And yes, death is hurts and it does suck and it is sad. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that funeral director is sad and dark and gloomy. Most of them are not.
Absolutely. Not just the gloom and doom.
And they're not all old and thin and tall and look like they're going to die at any moment.
Wear top hats, but I
Yeah.
think we should all wear more top hats.
Dude, there's something classy about it, right?
There's a top hat,
There's
bow
something
ties, right?
classy.
You go one extreme to another. Well, everybody out there, how do you feel? What do you think Hollywood should do more of? Do you think Hollywood portrays death right? Do you think they portray funeral professionals and psychologists with death right? Your thoughts, opinions? Maybe you don't have any opinions. Maybe you just want to tell us about a good song you listen to.
You can actually just send us a email that has an ellipsis on it. Then we got you thinking, right?
And our email, of course, is letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. And you can also reach us on our Facebook platform, Instagram platform, any platforms. Death is always around.
Why do you have to say platform?
I just like that. It's very
Okay.
professional to
It's
talk about
very-
platforms, right?
It's very silly.
Seems like if you were in a virtual meeting, they'd be like, "Now, how's your platforming going?"
Well, thank you for listening. And if you're not talking about death, you ain't living.
End scene.